What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the Honeystead. I'm enjoying one of my favorite cups of tea that my mom and I blended up about a year or so ago. In short, this tea is packed full of adaptogenic herbs, and we will, if you're interested in learning about this tea, I'll put that video down below. But the reasoning behind adaptogens and how supportive they are for your overall health, and what I'm trying to achieve by drinking this tea on a daily basis in large amounts. Given that we are going into spring, it is the season change. My garden still needs to be planted, and I've got a lot of colonies, a lot of honeybee colonies that need to be split. So with the hustle and bustle of my life, I definitely focus a lot of my attention on adaptogen herbs during this time period. Once everything kind of settles, I'll move on, pick another herb, and use that for about a month or so. But when I picked up the jar, it made me smile because we named this tea Grace and Dignity. There was a whole backstory about why we named the tea this name and the reasoning behind it. But we had the intentions on being able to enjoy this tea when we were facing moments where we might need a little grace and dignity. And let's just face it, we all could use a little more grace and dignity at some times in our life. But the whole thought process behind naming your tea something positive, I think, kind of goes a little bit deeper. And it's not something that I guess is talked about much, but most people would probably be able to acknowledge and see that. You see, when we blend up a tea or make a tincture, we want to pick a name that is going to be of something positive. And if you are new to blending, that's okay. I kind of relate blending teas with intention, blending tinctures with intention, with the same thought process of cooking. My family can know when I've cooked a meal that might not have been made with love. And I can even taste a difference compared to a meal that is cooked with love. I mean, that's a whole emotion in its own. But that positiveness, what you're doing, what you're creating, how you're blending something, that is something that is very important for not only what you're putting into your body, but also for your overall thoughts. May is Mental Health Awareness, and it is something that I've seen more and more people who have come out in the last couple of years that are struggling more than ever. And yes, introducing teas to your life is very important, but also practicing self-care. One of the ways that I'll go and I'll practice my own self-care is by getting outside. I will go for hikes, I'll go for walks, I will plug in my Audible, and I will just listen to all the stories. Right now I'm currently listening to The Lives of Bees by Thomas Seeley. I've read that book, but I've really kind of enjoyed listening to it versus reading it, especially if I'm up and working inside my colonies. It just gives me a whole different perspective of what's happening inside the colonies, and it brings me more at peace. It centers me. It allows me to just kind of forget about everything that's going on around and just strictly focus on what is right in front of me. Beekeeping alone is great for that, but plugging in a story and listening to the lives of bees as while you're in working with them, I don't know, there's something that it kind of connects you a little bit more. And if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm not exactly the type of person that likes to be pretty stationary. I am constantly on the go, and I'm not a big TV fan. So having Audible, having all of the books that I love to listen to, as much as I would love to sit and read, that's just not how my life works right now. That's not the season that I'm in. I am able to multitask. I'm able to work in the garden, work in my bees, go foraging, plug in and listen to the many stories that Audible has to offer, and of course, try to pick something that's positive. I want to listen to something that's positive instead of something that is negative. And it doesn't even have to be a book about a story. It can be educational. Audible has a huge variety of genres and different categories of books, from education, storytelling, self-help, self-improvement. I can't even go into the list of books that they offer that are not only scientific based, but also spiritual based as well. And it's funny, a lot of them are linked to staying positive, to remaining positive. And for any new member of Audible that would like to trial a 30-day period, you can use the link or text The.honeystead to 500-500. And I want to say a special thanks to Audible for sponsoring this video, as well as encouraging me to share with you guys. You guys probably see my life is a little bit all over the place because we do a little bit of a lot of things here on our homestead. But in all honesty, listening to Audible, drifting off to a good story while I am multitasking has got to be one of my favorite things that I get to do here. And it's my way of self-care. It's my way of still allowing myself an opportunity to learn and hear stories. And I know that there are so many more that I cannot wait to listen to. But now it's time to go forage. So come on, let's go pick some plants. So this is one plant that I would say put your gloves on when you're going to harvest. Now, I'm only going to harvest a little bit. There's not enough to do what I wanted to do, but I am going to go ahead, harvest one stalk to be able to kind of show you guys this plant and what we're dealing with. And I'm going to go ahead. There for a second, I thought we were going to get a little bit of a thunderstorm, so we're gonna do this outside as long as it doesn't start storming. If it does, we're gonna head back into the apothecary. But I want to introduce you to a plant that I have growing that we started as seed down behind on the back side of the apothecary, not necessarily a place that we will go and walk through. This is stinging nettle, or Urtica dioica, and I'll put that down below so you guys can check to make sure. I tend to butcher the scientific names. I'm gonna own that. That is what it is. But I want to show you guys because I've had a lot of people ask about why is it called stinging nettle. And if you look very, very closely, you will see that it has all these little hairs on the plant. And I'll tell you a story about the first time that I was introduced to stinging nettle. I was probably about 8 years old, and we were floating the river. If you guys are from Virginia and near a river, that's called tubing, floating, float the river. That means you sit on a tube and you float down the river. Yes, that is an activity that we do quite often here. The river that we float down is the Shenandoah River, and it's a beautiful river, and one that I have had a lot of childhood memories in. But one year we were floating the river, and we got to our stop. And so my parents, they were getting out of their tubes, which they weren't even tubes back then. Uh-oh. Yeah. We might be going inside. Come on. Let's go back into the apothecary before we get rained on, and I'll finish telling you the story. That might be a little bit better. All right, where was I? I was telling you my embarrassing story of when I was a little girl and we were floating the Shenandoah River, not on tubes. We actually used the inside of the tire, you know, the black tube that's inside of a tire. That's what we would be floating down. And yes, those things get quite hot when you're sitting on the tube and it is sun beaten down. Anyways, we probably went on about an 8-hour float, and by the time that we got to our pickup point, we were all exhausted. So my parents were already loading up their tube, and of course, me being the person that I am, I did not get out of the river the way everybody else got out of the river. I made my own path. Sounds kind of familiar. That's how my life works. But sometimes going down those paths make you remember things. So I had my tube loaded up and I was walking up a very muddy hillside. And it was surrounded by a whole bunch of plants. There wasn't really a path. I made my own path. Again, learned a lesson. But I walked through an entire patch of stinging nettle. And let me just tell you, the name stinging nettle is 100% accurate, because that is exactly what I felt throughout my entire body. I was only wearing a bathing suit and my tennis shoes, and I had my tube, and I probably had about 30 feet of stinging nettle that I had to walk to, and all of a sudden my whole body just started burning. And I will never forget that. So here, I go throughout my whole childhood despising this plant, okay? Truly just like, I don't want anything to do with it. It's a bad plant, it burns. And so that was my first introduction to this plant. Now, fast forward. I'd heard about stinging nettles and its medicinal property, but again, I had not a very good relationship with this plant. And so it wasn't one that I was like jumping into and ready to grow here on our homestead until I started to really learn about all of the medicinal properties and what it had to offer. So this whole time, my whole childhood, I had this negative relationship with this plant because of the burn that I experienced. I mean, and it burned. I am not lying. That was very painful, and one that I will probably forever remember. But it took me rethinking and reintroducing myself to this plant in a whole nother light and what it has to offer. And stinging nettles, yes, it stings because all of those little stingy hairs. That is why I'm wearing gloves. I'm not brave enough quite yet to to go harvest gloveless. But even when my mom and I went to herbal school and I walked through with flip-flops my teacher's stinging nettle patch, and I relived that moment, I relived that burn. It took Teresa sharing with me the benefit of what that burn can do. And she shared with me how people who tend to have neuropathy will rub their feet or their hands in the stinging nettle patch to re-stimulate. So again, it was all how I was looking at it. I didn't want to look at this plant as a negative anymore, because then I started realizing all of the positive at what it has to offer and how many systems it can support into your overall body. Now, stinging nettles is packed full of many vitamins: vitamin A, vitamin K, vitamin B, and even vitamin C. You can use the aerial parts as well as the roots. I have actually not harvested the roots, and that's one thing that I do plan on doing, probably going more towards fall, because I want the energy of the plant to go kind of back down into the roots. That's kind of my thought process. So we'll revisit that plant come this fall for the roots. And unfortunately, I didn't get a very large harvest for the leaves quite yet. But we're going to talk a few things that you can do with it. One is putting it into a tea, drying it, freeze drying it, air drying it, blending it into a lovely tea. That alone is so green and is so fresh, and there's so many benefits that this plant has to offer. It's very supportive to your urinary system as well as your respiratory system, and it's a pretty powerful anti-inflammatory. Now, one of the articles that I had read was something that I haven't tried yet, and I do plan on doing it, but we're gonna harvest a bunch of the leaves and I'm going to infuse it into an oil because I plan on adding a little bit of my beeswax into it to make a salve. What I found after reading properties that are in this plant, especially the anti-inflammatory, made into like a topical salve, is really good for any type of arthritis or chronic pain. And I was kind of hoping to do up a little bit of a patch because I took a fall the other day and bruised the whole inside of my thigh. Don't ask, it was not a very good situation. I learned my lesson, and I'm constantly hurting myself. And thank goodness we have plants that are around us that could offer us some relief. So I'm gonna probably skip on that plant because it's just not enough to harvest, and I don't quite have as much time. But I do have some cottonwood salve, some balm of Gilead. I might use that for pain. That just reminds me, I will end up grabbing that before I go back down. But you can also tincture it too. Now, we use a lot of stinging nettle this time of year, mainly because the seasonal allergies are just through the roof. The pollen count is so high. So incorporating stinging nettles as a fresh or in a dried form in a tea, drinking that, I want you guys to do your research, read about the antihistamine properties, what it can offer, how it can relieve the pressure because of the anti-inflammatory. It also has natural quercetin in it. And not only is it good for your overall sinus and anti-inflammatory, it's also very supportive for your respiratory system. And the other thing that I like about stinging nettles as well, mainly this time of year, we're going from winter to spring. So that means we're changing, we are flushing out all the winter stagnant toxins, all of that. But stinging nettles is a very strong detoxifier, and it's very good for your lymphatic system and just kind of kickstarting and cleansing, as well as promoting a very healthy gut. But I wanted to introduce you to this plant. I know a lot of people are starting to really become affected by seasonal allergies, and this is a good one. If you have it growing, you can use it, and it's not only good for that, it is good for many other things. I do want you to do your own research, make sure that this plant is something that you are okay with introducing into your life. It doesn't have any contraindications, however, it is something that I want you guys to do your research. I want you to become familiar with the plants and grow a relationship with them, because whether you learn about them strictly for you, or you learn about them to be able to, this is something that you can offer when you know if somebody is in need. And that, I think, is a beautiful thing to be familiarized with. This is not gonna go to waste. I'm gonna brew up a very small cup of fresh nettle tea. I started getting a tickle in the back of my throat, and I think that this is gonna be very lovely and helpful and supportive. And next time when we have a good bit ready to harvest, let's go ahead and plan on harvesting some, setting it up in an oil, and making it into a salve. So, as always, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty and learn something old. Bye, guys.